Morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us in Lighthouse's Illumination webinar series today featuring the topic, How to Bring eDiscovery In-House from Seasoned Self-Service Adopters. Really quickly, before we get started, a few housekeeping items to cover with everyone. At the end of the webinar today, you will receive a survey link. Please do fill it out if you have the opportunity. Included in the survey link will be a PDF of the deck that we'll be presenting today, so you all have that for your reference. And lastly, and throughout the webinar at any point, should any questions pop up or should you want clarification on anything, please do feel free to submit a question or a comment in the chat window available through WebEx. Now we'll move on to introductions.
Hi, I am Jennifer Case, and I work at Dentons. I am a former litigation paralegal and have been in the eDiscovery space now for about 6 years. I, at Dentons, manage a team of project managers, and we work just day-to-day with our case teams working across all aspects of the EDRM.
Thanks, Jennifer. Debbie?
Hi, my name is Debbie Beeler. I'm a litigation paralegal with T-Mobile. In my current role, I support our patent litigators. I've been in the eDiscovery space for about 13 years.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming. Allison?
Thanks, Brooks. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Shire. I am a Client Solutions Director here at Lighthouse. I've been in eDiscovery for about 10 years and Lighthouse for over 4. And in my role here, I help our clients adopt all of the different services that Lighthouse offers, including but not limited to our self-service offering.
Thanks, Allison. And my name is Brooks Thompson. I oversee our Spectra operations and support team here at Lighthouse. Been with the company for working on 11 years now and focused on Spectra specifically for the last 2. All right, let's dive in. Today we're going to cover a number of different items. Like I said, please do feel free to shoot any questions or comments into the chat bar at any point if you'd like further clarification on anything. We're going to start with the evolution of self-service technology in eDiscovery, move on to the use cases, then into objections that we frequently see pop up, key tips for implementation, takeaways, and then we'll move to a Q&A session there at the end. Starting to talk about the growing popularity of self-service tools. I think, having been at Lighthouse here for a little over a decade now, I myself have seen an interesting vacillation in the market from there being very, very limited in-house handling of any type of work like this. Over the last, decade to getting to the point where in the last 2 or 3 years specifically, there's been a real strong, consistent uptick for teams to bring that work in-house and to be able to control costs and to control workflows when and where appropriate. When we think about the growth that we've seen, Allison, in the last few years, what do you think has led to that growth, and how do you feel like if COVID has played an impact at all?
Yeah, I do think that we have seen steady growth towards more insourcing, both for our law firm and corporate clients over the past few years. I think that there has been a significant uptick during COVID. I think primarily that's driven by budget constraints. I think a lot of our partners are trying to find ways to deal with certain types of matters in a more cost-efficient manner, and insourcing can be one of those solutions. I think that a lot of our clients are also facing staffing constraints, and they're trying to figure out how they can partner with providers like us, when they're trying to insource, but they need some overflow support because they're running a little bit leaner than usual. And lastly, I think the last trend we're spotting is people kind of moving away from having infrastructure, paying and managing infrastructure alongside IT, paying for licenses and things like that. So a lot of people are coming to us saying, what are the other options on the table today relative to 3 years ago when we insourced? We had to purchase a lot of infrastructure and do a lot of work in-house before we even get to the downstream eDiscovery.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And Debbie, when you think about T-Mobile, what do you see, what changed? What were the key factors in driving your team to implement a self-service option there?
For me, it's probably better to back up a little bit. When I first came into the eDiscovery space, it was with a team who was bringing all of their discovery in-house. And so, I was accustomed to seeing those cost-saving measures that's very important to any corporation. That team was beneficial, in, like I say, in that cost saving. At T-Mobile, that is definitely, as you say, with most corporate in-house teams, we are very lean, and so having a tool that we can rely on and is comfortable to use by a small group of people, it was really helpful for us to bring in that self-service tool.
Yeah, and Debbie, I think, through partnership with a number of our corporate clients, I've found that I think one of the things that corporations especially appreciate about the evolution of self-service technology and having that option available is now they have the option to look at a case, assess its risk profile, take a look at the potential financial impact to the firm, and then decide whether or not that's something that they'd like to handle themselves to gain some efficiency and potentially capture some cost outs, or to leverage a full service team to do that work. Do you feel like that's been something that you guys have appreciated about the self-service kind of growth in the last few years?
Definitely, and we've seen both sides of that coin. We had a couple of cases and when we were, growing accustomed to, having that self-service in-house, and that were, went smoothly, very successful. But then one came along that we realized, ooh, this is going to get out of hand and be more time-consuming than our in-house team can manage. So let's flip that. Let's go ahead and make it a full-service space. And it was really seamless, very easy to do, and really amazing knowing that we had that support available and we're able to pivot quickly.
Yeah, and Jennifer, from the law firm side, I mean, you guys have been long-time technology adopters, but when you think about that transition into self-service and away from complete outsourcing, what were the things that you all looked for, and why did you make that transition? Jennifer, I think you might be on mute.
I am. Apologies there. Yes,
there we go.
Following us kind of on what Allison and Debbie both said, costs are always a big thing in law firms. But for us at Denton's, when we made the most recent switch, we were really looking at how could we be more nimble and decide our own fate of sorts. We have, as well as looking for a partner that could bring us some innovating technologies and things to the table to use with our case teams. So, we came from a traditional managed services type of model where processing and those type of, day-to-day type of things were handled by that partner. But we were finding, even though we're a big law firm, we do have a lot of small, very quick-moving cases. So we would get the mid-afternoon email that was, here's an extra document to add to our production for today, and we were finding ourselves up against the wall. So being able to move to this self-service model allowed us, again, to be more nimble and get those documents, through processing and back into the review platform and out for production a lot more quickly, which really helped service our case teams.
Yeah, and Jennifer, would you say it's fair to say as well, in conversations with many of our law firm clients, I think one of the other things that really drove that transition from outsourcing to insourcing eDiscovery was that ability to really shift the cost structure around where, there are going to be professional services hours, there's going to be data analysis, there's going to be validations and QCs and things that are going to be done regardless of who does the work. But by insourcing it, you're able to take the massive team that you all have in-house of the experts that know the clients, they know the case teams, they know what they're looking for, and shift those cost structures from something where you guys are going to have to pass through a cost from a vendor to be able to capture those costs in-house. Do you feel like that was influential in that transition as well?
It was. So we, as part of this, we bifurcated our team. So we have a team of analysts that, work on that facilitating the process of processing and working through our QCs. And then we have the front-facing team of project managers handling, matters from relativity all the way downstream. So bifurcating this way, it did allow us to shift those costs. So whereas normally, we would have vendor fees for processing and those types of tasks, we're able to transition that back to the law firm, which is always, what law firms are doing is recouping costs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would imagine for any law firm attendees on the panel, it's an interesting opportunity to potentially shift some of that revenue back in-house. All right, so moving from popularity and the growth of self-service tools into the use cases. Use cases is a fascinating thing because I think depending on which individual teams in-house may be interested in a self-service discovery platform, from the litigation teams, maybe it's a compliance team, maybe it's an investigations team, maybe it's a team that responds to labor and employment matters or third-party subpoenas. I think the use cases are varied, and I think that depending on the technological adoption and how open people are, you can really have these self-service tools cover everything from very small cases to extremely large cases. And Debbie, when you think of, when you guys are analyzing a case and something comes across your desk and it's like, hey, where are we going to go with this? What do we want to do? What types of matters are you guys preferring to handle in-house? Kind of how are you assessing that, and what makes the most sense at T-Mobile?
When we were looking at the analysis of what, what was it, a type of case, was it the size of the case, what we realized is that the size wasn't as important, the number of docs wasn't as important as if the matter was formulaic, where we were going to see, the usual types of documents and not something complicated. So if it fit into a mold, so to speak, and that made it feel like that it was something more manageable. As with a third-party subpoena, you're not going to have just some really different types of documents. It's gonna follow pretty much a formula, and so that's been good for our litigation team, and now now that we have the process, we've been able to introduce it to other teams in the company.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I mean, I think it's probably slightly different inside the firm, but when you guys take a look at a case as it comes across the eDiscovery team there, and you're making your decisions on what to do and how to handle it, what types of matters and what influences are there to make you decide to go one direction or the other?
Well, so we pretty much decided to just go all in. So as I mentioned before, we wanted the self-service model as a lifeboat for our quick moving and small matters. But we very quickly also decided to kind of dip our toes in the water, and we ran several hundred gig matters through with some great success. There's a great processing engine and things, and so we decided to give it an even harder kick. And more recently, we were able to push through a little over 1 terabyte of data, and we did so in less than a week. So we were able to leverage that technology and scalability, so it's been great. So we have great buy-in for really all of our cases, and we just found it to be helpful for everything that we do at Dentons.
Yeah, wonderful. And, something else I think that we should cover is, a lot of our European clients are leveraging self-service technology to handle DSARs. With the growth of the popularity of having that data subject access request available to people inside of the European Union, and now with CCPA in California, we've certainly seen a lot of our European clients leverage self-service technology for those DSARs. Allison, in your experience with the clients that you're working with in the EU and any clients that are headquartered in California or have clients in California, have you seen that adoption rise and people start to use these self-service tools to service those types of cases?
Yeah, and I mean, I think those are, particularly when you're looking at on the corporate side, that's a great use case because you have this proliferation of needing to review tons of individual mailboxes. And instead of kicking so many requests over to your vendor partner or partners, it allows you to take a quick look at those mailboxes and figure out what next steps are going to be. And I think that's true of DSARs. I also think it's true of a lot of compliance reviews. You know, I still have teams come to us and say that they're either reviewing the native Outlook PST or they're doing other things, and they want to figure out how they can use self-service technology to insource that and reduce the number of documents that those compliance teams need to look at by using technology like email threading, and suppression, other things that you can do when you're doing more of a needle in a haystack review than a pure litigation review. And so I think all of these cases up here are great examples of the types of things that we're seeing insourced. And I get, Brooks, this question a lot from clients. What types of cases should we be handling? And my response is often this list here, but it's also that it's dependent on a lot of other factors outside of case type. And Debbie alluded to this. So it's going to be staffing and bandwidth. You know, some of our clients have very centralized eDiscovery technology teams within their firms and corporate and corporations. Others are more bifurcated. They're having, paralegals take on more of a technology role, or other people who have traditionally been in more litigation-focused roles. So it's also trying to figure out what is your bandwidth to handle these cases, what is your current expertise in the technology, and what is your risk assessment? Where do you draw the line? We want to do self-service, but up until the point of production. We don't want our teams running production. So there's a variety of factors that you weigh in conjunction with case type to try and figure out what your formula is going to be to figure out if you're going to insource or outsource a matter.
Yeah, and Allison, you mentioned something that I think is really important, and I'd like to circle back on it and hear more of your thoughts. I think something that we see all the time, and I know you see all the time, is that the eDiscovery adjacent teams inside of companies and inside of firms, but more inside of corporations, the compliance teams, the internal investigators, the subpoena response teams, have processes that they're following to get that work done, but it is generally done in kind of a hodgepodge of ways. They'll search email and Outlook, and then they'll download, and then they'll convert in PDF using Adobe Pro, for instance, and they'll produce documents that way. And while it certainly does get the job done, it's not efficient. It often takes somewhat far longer to do that work inside of those platforms than it would inside of a traditional eDiscovery tool. And it's not as defensible because you can't audit and track what you've done, and it doesn't store things like work product and things along those lines. Do you feel like some of the use cases that you're seeing when you're working with our clients are to transition those kind of eDiscovery adjacent teams into a more kind of single unified workflow?
Yeah, and I think a lot of our clients come to us to figure out how to do that, right? How to make that transition. They're saying we want to leverage deduplication to review these mailboxes and suppression, and we want to leverage analytics even and kind of reimagine the entire way we're doing this. How do we get from point A to point B? And so again, that's a technology question. I do think that more people are becoming savvy in-house in kind of tools that everyone is using in the eDiscovery market for many years now. And I also think it's about just putting some workflow in place that people in-house can reasonably execute on. And that comes right back to what Debbie said about making it formulaic. If you're trying to transition your compliance team into a more eDiscovery review than a localized review, what formula can we work with you to create so that you can be efficient in doing that and kind of smoothly transition into a better process? Yeah.
And I see that someone just put a question into the comment bar here, so let me read this out. So how self-sufficient are in-house attorneys and legal teams in using the self-service technology? Does your in-house team have to do a lot of hand-holding, or do you think in-house teams have become more sophisticated users of technology like Relativity? Debbie, that's probably a question that's best for you, if you don't mind addressing it.
Sure. Yes, our in-house teams have definitely become more tech savvy, more comfortable using the discovery tools that are in the industry, and a lot of corporations, as T-Mobile has done, has hired experts, people that are, want to keep their finger on the cutting edge of what's happening. And so we do definitely have a more sophisticated in-house team, than maybe even as little as 5 years ago.
Yeah, thank you. All right, from use cases to objections, no matter how good an idea is, how much time it'll save you, or how much money you'll get back, there's always going to be some objections to making that kind of shift. Jennifer, we'll start with you on this one. When you think back, and obviously Denton's is a massive firm, you guys have offices all over the world and multiple different departments that are going to have a say in things like this. But, when you guys were at the table and you were having that conversation about making that transition, what were some of the top objections that you were hearing in the room?
So, yeah, there's several. I think the biggest and first one was security. So, it's obviously one of the big things out there that we hear a lot about, and if it's not being talked about, there's probably a problem. Law firms obviously are sensitive to that as well. We're talking about taking our firm or client data and having it handled by a third party through the cloud. So we approached that kind of obstacle by going through a pretty rigorous vetting or RFP process. And we just made sure that we, as part of that process, we, from the very get-go, got buy-in from or included our security teams and our IT teams and people that had those right concerns. And, we allowed them to be a part of that process from drafting the actual RFPs. And once we got down the line and had a couple of partners, that we had looked like they were going to be the ones, we continued to let those security teams and things be part of that vetting process. And as part of that, I think we actually saw that they were pleasantly surprised and sometimes, just besides themselves, realizing how much that some of these eDiscovery partners have done to keep data secure. Realizing that you guys are, the experts in the eDiscovery business, where they're experts on the law firm side, kind of different models. So that's how we overcame like the security piece.
Wonderful. I think something that we hear often from law firm clients, especially law firm clients that are going to be large consumers of self-service technology, is around pricing and the ability to kind of corral that, create some predictability, create some flexibility. Any advice or anything you could share with the attendees today around kind of how you guys may have overcome that pricing objection?
Yeah. Pricing, again, a big one. Law firms we kind of had two perspectives on that. The first being the spend, obviously. So kind of things that Allison pointed out even earlier, the licensing and those types of things going into the self-service model, we didn't have to have those line item spends. So having this model and the MSP made sense to us because it allowed for certainty and predictability month after month or annually, and even just looking over the life of our entire contract. So that gave a sense of security to the people looking at what is our spend going to be. And then the second kind of piece, again, is law firms are always trying to recoup where they can. And so having an idea of, that controlled spend, we were able to then personalize and be flexible with a bill back or cost recovery model. So that was probably the way we jumped the hurdle the biggest, is because now, in addition to bringing all of our, again, we have that bifurcated team, all of those billable hours are now here within the firm. We're also able to create a bill back model based off of, processing or hosting. And we did so in a tiered manner. So we're able to offer, some of these services to some of our smaller cases, sometimes at no charge. And then on our larger matters, we're able to be more flexible, both making this really pretty fiscally sound for the firm as a whole and very cost advantageous to our clients and case teams.
Yeah, wonderful. And, Debbie, switching to you here, I mean, when you guys are talking again and there are objections, whether it's, to use this case specifically inside a self-service platform or or something else. What are those objections that you're hearing in the room?
Well, as security was definitely an issue for us as well, as Jennifer mentioned. But then the other thing is time. As I mentioned before, being an in-house team, we are very lean, and so is the in-house team going to be able to devote the time that's needed to run a case successfully start to finish? And it was, the way we overcame that objection is, knowing that we had support from the vendor and didn't have to completely rely on our own team, that we could pivot to full service if we needed to, but then we were able to show that because the product is very nimble and easily, just very user friendly. So that made it just a real win for our in-house team, that our in-house staff is able to manage the cases that we've carefully chosen.
Yeah, and Debbie, I think you highlighted a really important item there, which is, one of the things that may overcome an objection for those people that are having those conversations internally right now about whether or not to make that transition is to ask the people that they're vetting and, the technologies that they're looking into, whether they have that flexibility. Is this a situation where, you give me the keys and you give me a user's manual and you train me and then you step away and I'm kind of left to figure it out on my own? Or is there a professional services arm that's available to help train and execute work as needed? Do I have the ability to kind of pull the ripcord and make that transition from a self-service to a full-service environment? So, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that that's something we regularly run into as well, which is, clients really do want that added comfort of saying, like, hey, I want to be able to drive when I want to, but I would love to have that security of knowing that I can reach out and, get training on additional technology as new features roll out, et cetera, having that team available. Allison, I think you probably are the tip of the spear here at Lighthouse in terms of conversations with our clients and our potential clients around potentially making that switch from an outsourced to an insourced model. The conversations that you're having with our corporate clients, with our law firm clients, what other objections are you hearing, and how are you overcoming them?
I think the one that comes up most often is the time commitment that it takes to undergo this process. Some of our clients are able to fast track the process, kind of dip their toe in and adopt self-service. Others have to go through a very rigorous RFP procurement process. There's a lot of logistics within their company or their firm, and Jennifer and Debbie have touched on both, working with IT, figuring out kind of the financial element of it, and whether you're insourcing for the first time or you're actually switching from one model to another, the primary stakeholders have to be in a position to commit time. And so, one of the things that we recommend is finding your internal stakeholder or champion early on. In a law firm setting, that may be a litigation partner, somebody kind of helping oversee pushing those items forward. In-house on the corporate side, that may be someone in legal ops. That may be someone within an eDiscovery group. That may be your head of litigation. No matter who it is, it's just very helpful to have that champion to push it forward. And I think when you're kind of thinking about the time commitment to this, it's just about setting realistic goals about when you can finish a vetting process, what time is going to be required to implement. Are you doing this entirely on your own in-house, or do you have a partner to support you? And how does that impact your timeline? Do you have technology you're sunsetting, and is that going to kind of dictate the timeline you have as you make a transition? So that time commitment can be a blocker, but I think that, our clients are very busy people, but I think that when they kind of create a roadmap, it's something that they can definitely overcome.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that that's kind of a perfect segue into our next conversation here, which is So now you've overcome the objections. You've made the decision to bring some or all of your eDiscovery in-house. What are the tips for implementing that, and how do you make that transition? You know, I think, again, Allison, we'll stick with you here. I think as someone who frequently is driving the plans and creating the structure to transition either partially or entirely into these in-sourced models, you know, what phases, what are the key takeaways, what tips or tricks can you share with the attendees today on how to run that implementation?
Yeah, so some we just touched on, for example, involving a key stakeholder early on. Another one is getting your hands around a data migration plan, whether it's trying to figure out, let's say you're moving to insourcing for the first time, but you want to migrate and internalize cases that are presently with vendors. It's making sure you're working with counsel to identify where all of your data lives. If you're transitioning from one model to another, it'll be migrating all of those cases. So it's about scoping really in data hygiene. Can you decommission some of those cases before you make the move? Also, if you have tools in-house today, what can you sunset? Are there licenses you can offload through this process? And how much expertise do you have in the tools that you're onboarding? Do you need to roll out a training program? Do you need to educate some of your staff that you're bringing into the service to help support it? And if yes, what do you need to make sure that you cover? And then you're really moving from planning into more of implementation. So how are we going to do billing implementation? Do we need to make sure we're billing back certain business units in-house at a corporation? Do we need to figure out how to bill certain case teams and clients if you're on the law firm side? What reporting do we need to be providing those business units and case teams? What processes are we going to outline within a playbook to make sure the people handling the day-to-day are being consistent and formulaic, as we've mentioned before? And then lastly, it's that adoption plan, right, of what we call bringing people into the service. Some folks have existing vendor preferences. Some are used to doing things a certain way. So if you're making a commitment to in-source, how do you then bring all of your end clients, your users, so to speak, into that service and drive that adoption?
Yeah. Yeah. Debbie, as someone who's really been a champion there at bringing more and more people and more cases into the fold in this self-service environment, you know, what are your tips for implementation?
Well, for us, it was, you know, as I mentioned earlier, finding that you know, one or two right-sized cases and building a process around that. And, you know, then once we were, you know, comfortable in our own shoes, so to speak, we were, you know, we're able to, you know, go to the other teams that we believe that this will provide efficiencies for and cost savings, and say to them, you know, this is how we've used it. This is the, you know, the basic process that we use. This is the flexibility that it offers, and bring those other teams around to being able to take advantage of it as well.
Yeah. And Jennifer, I think, you know, again, I think the law firm world is different from the corporate world. And when you guys were taking a look and you made this transition, you've overcome the objections, you decided which direction to go in, you know, what were the key points, and how did you guys really make sure that you implemented that technology successfully and brought everyone into the fold?
Yeah, so we focused on, well, there were many things, you know, kind of as Debbie mentioned and Allison, planning. The three big ones were developing a migration plan, and so we were coming from a previously managed services environment, so we were predominantly migration. So as part of that, we were reaching out to our case teams, finding out which cases were, you know, fast-tracked, you know, heavy activity where we needed to transition those cases sometimes overnight, and coming up with that plan, working with our partner in order to get that done. Other cases, you know, were small or were larger or, you know, in a dormant state, and we could lengthen that migration timeout. So really developing that plan was a big deal for us, so that our case teams didn't have any, you know, downtime, so to speak. The other was we touched on with pricing is creating our cost recovery model. So you know, doing that, allowing us to offer this tiered kind of service for our case teams, was helpful. And then we also developed a training program. So again, and that was also bifurcated or, set out based off of the different roles that we have in a law firm. So a lot of times your paralegals and associates are, the ones heavy hitting your tool and your review platforms, and they were the ones we wanted to get the greatest buy-in from first. And so, they were our first ones that we trained. And then moving on to our partners, we took a little bit of a different approach, and it's not so much hands-on training and those types of things, but more about what this tools and what this service is going to allow them to do and allow them to offer their clients.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting thing to think about. And just got another question here in the chat window. And Allison, I think I'll start with this one for you. What are some concrete things that you have done or you've had our clients do to drive adoption of their self-service programs?
Yeah, so one of the things that can be helpful is a roadshow. I think Jennifer mentioned, for example, Denton's has so many different offices, and sometimes offices within a law firm are siloed in the way that they manage eDiscovery. So it's trying to figure out how you can hit those different offices and help educate them around the service and bring them into the fold. We're talking about cost recovery, and so the service is not going to allow you to recover costs if people aren't using it. So once you've made that decision within a certain eDiscovery group to bring on the service to drive adoption, you'll want to make sure that you're identifying stakeholders across different offices and educating people about the service and kind of bringing them into the fold. Another thing we do, and it can be really helpful on the corporate side, is get a couple cases under your belt working with people that you can give a great first experience to that will then tell others about the service and what a successful experience they've had and build a case study around it. Something tangible that you can give out to people to say, this is what we accomplished. This is how much data we culled for, ourselves or for our clients and what we ultimately saved, and put those cost savings on paper and kind of help people understand what they can really make happen if they kind of come into the service from a savings and efficiency perspective.
Yeah. Jennifer, anything you think you'd like to add on top of that?
No, those are all good things. I think not belaboring, but going back to the cost structure, for us being able to offer a really simple 2-line item cost structure, and in some cases for many of our case teams, zero entry. You can get in, you can get to your data very quickly, we can get your data produced very quickly without any cost. So I think that's really important. I know for us, we traditionally, we have some partners, some case teams that really only dealt with the vendor market, and we felt ourselves kind of always being in between analyzing vendor invoices and what's tipping and what's OCRing. So, for us to be able to, again, develop that cost structure and billing that's easy to understand and easy for even a partner who doesn't know a lot about eDiscovery or really wants to care about review, to be able to pass that on to their client, not only see the cost savings, see the money back into the firm through billable hours, has really helped us with that adoption.
Yeah, and I think, going back to something that you mentioned earlier that I think is, important to revisit, I think something else that's really critical in this implementation and something that will help with with making that transition and that cost model and bringing that work in-house is predetermining kind of what reporting you need so that you're able to show those items, right? To be able to show the efficiency, to show the savings, and not just get a report or a bill at the end of the month that says, oh, here's a $100,000 invoice, have a great day, but being able to then break that information out, understand where your data is, understand where your efficiencies are. Do you feel like that's played a role in helping implementation?
Yes, definitely. Having reporting and being able to line item those things out is super helpful.
Wonderful. Wrapping up here before we go into Q&A, I think some key takeaways from our conversation today. Self-service is gaining momentum more and more every day. With the advances in technology, it becoming more and more user-friendly, it becoming more and more flexible to accept modern data sources, Gmail, G Suite, Office 365, Slack, etc. Self-service eDiscovery is not going anywhere, and it's getting more and more popular every day. I think another key takeaway for us, in our opinion, is that even if you're not looking to make that full radical transition, that full sea change into insourcing all of your eDiscovery, there are still a number of opportunities to insource components or individual use cases or matter types that will allow you to still see significant cost savings and efficiency gains without having to transition in an entire department, make an entire shift like that, but allowing you to grow as you'd like, starting with smaller use cases, building to medium size, moving to larger if you'd like. I think something else that was really highlighted that was important is that most objections that we're running into can be overcome either through documentation, education, or transitions in the service model. And lastly, I think, and this is something that Allison certainly specializes in, is making sure that if you've decided to make that transition, that you're really thoughtful, that you're really in front of making that decision, and you create those implementation plans that really specifically map out how you're going to handle things like migration and reporting and invoicing and training and rolling out, whether it's starting with a singular office or across the portfolio, so that you can really go into it eyes wide open with a really steady, solid plan to make sure that that transition is successful. So now we will move into our Q&A phase. If there are any questions inside of the attendees, please just put them in the chat. All right, just got our first one. With so many self-service options out there, how do you distinguish what is the right model for your team? Example, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, partnering with a provider who has their own technology. I'll put that out there for you guys. With the self-service options, what are important, and what helps you make a decision to go in one of those different directions?
Yeah, I get this question so often, so I'll go ahead and get us started. I think that a lot of our clients are grappling with whether they kind of stay with the root inertia at the moment of an infrastructure kind of model, or whether they make the leap to the cloud. I think they're trying to decide if they have a relativity-based solution or if they go into something that's proprietary. I think they're trying to figure out what APIs are available, for example, to try and integrate things like Office 365 with their self-service model. So one of the trends that is absolutely true is that there has been a proliferation of options over the past couple of years, and a lot of our clients are trying to figure out what's right for them. I think when you're thinking about infrastructure, I do see a trend going a little bit more away from that, because people are wanting to deal a little bit less with licensing and scaling licenses, and also working very closely with IT to maintain the infrastructure element of it. I think that formerly from a budget standpoint, a lot of our clients had eDiscovery technology falling under an IT budget, and that's slowly coming out of IT budget and coming into legal. And so they're trying to reevaluate and say, does this really make sense for us to both maintain and to eat in terms of cost? So I'm seeing a little bit more movement away. I see a lot of our clients in this middle ground where they're not entirely ready quite yet to jump to the cloud. They may have an appetite for it, but they're not necessarily ready to make that leap. So they may be looking for a little bit more of software as a service, connecting with vendor partners to try and figure out how technology may be behind, for example, a firewall of one of your providers. They're handling maintenance from IT. They are handling licenses and can scale up and down. And you can just kind of use the service and not have to be as concerned about those elements. And then it comes down to what technology best suits our needs. Do we want to go into a platform that is proprietary? And to Debbie's earlier point, if yes, and a case grows, is it easy to transition it into full service? And that's going to depend on whether or not you're using kind of more standard fair relativity technology or something more proprietary on the market today, where it may be a little bit more difficult for you to transition that case out of the self-service. And so a lot of our clients are trying to figure out, where does it make sense for us to live? And I think the trends are towards trying to work with having technology behind a firewall of a provider like us and trying to take advantage of the service, or trying to figure out how to insource entirely on their own without having to manage infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. Another question that we just got in, what billing models have you seen be successful with self-service tools? And I think I'll take a crack at this one. I think, we have a number of different clients, like I said, that are coming into self-service with a number of different desired goals and a number of different ideal outcomes based off of how they think that they'll consume the technology. Is this something that they're going to use in limited use cases where they're really trying to contain costs? Is this a situation where they're going to be using it more broadly across a number of different business units or across a number of different case teams, and it's critical that they be able to understand and allocate costs and expenses to individual business units, to individual teams? Is this something where they're like very confident with the fact that they are going to quickly adopt the technology and they're going to quickly use it for a lot of or all of their work, and therefore they'd really like the ability to gain the economy of scale by having a larger subscription? But I think that the two models that we see be the most popular, that we've seen be the most popular for our clients and in the market are really, first is a purely consumption-based model, right? You pay for what you use, on an invoice, in a month, and in the reporting, you can track to a specific matter, gigs, users, docs, et cetera. You can really understand that you're only paying for what you're using, and then you can either pass those costs through, you can allocate them to a department or to a team, or you can mark them up and charge them to your clients. I think the second model that we've seen be really successful is that subscription-based model, right? Where you're going to use a larger suite of services, that you're going to consume more in a given month, quarter, year, et cetera, and being able to gain the efficiency of saying, hey, I would like to be able to host 20 terabytes in a month, process 10 terabytes, produce, I want 100 users, I need 200 hours of support, I need 20 hours of support, I want 10 million documents in the analytics tools. Whatever it may be that is right-sized for your use cases and for your needs, and then bundling that into a single price point so that you have that predictability and you have that transparency into your costs. And then you're able to take that information and allocate it out as you'd like. Are there cases that you'd like to give away for free because they meet a certain criteria? Are there matters that you do want to charge, but you're going to upcharge them? Are there ones where you're going to pass through costs? Because you know what your costs are going to be and because it's predictable, you're then able to take those operational metrics and determine how you'd best like to transition either those costs to individual business units inside the company or to your clients.
And Brooks, what I would add there is there are definitely clients who don't have the level of footprint to take the leap of saying we're going to purchase an environment. They're working in a more a la carte kind of format. They're dipping their toe into self-service, but they're looking at a more kind of case level model, and then they'll kind of ramp long term and make a transition into a different model if and when it's appropriate. So I think there are clients, and maybe if we have listeners who are kind of in that middle ground where they're saying, I don't need to purchase an environment, I don't need a huge commitment, but I want the capability to leverage self-service technology when I need it to be more nimble. There is definitely a fair number of clients who live in that in-between space while they try and figure out what their longer-term plan is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we've also seen a number of clients that want to leverage the efficiency of those subscription models, but don't want to go from 0 to 100, and they'll have a ramping schedule. They will say in quarter one, we will consume, make up a number, 500 gigabytes, in quarter two, 1,000, in quarter three, 2,000, and, quarter four, we'll get to our assumed potential volume here, which is 4 terabytes, for example, and ramp into that subscription as well.
Right.
We just got another question here in the bar. Can you touch on the latest practices / technologies around removing confidential information from ESI prior to hosting and review? Allison, this might be one that's best for you.
Yeah, I think that a lot of our clients are asking questions about what they can do in platforms like, G Suite and Office 365 before data will move out into the model, because those kind of platforms and technologies are, have capabilities like labeling and categorization to try and flag documents that may contain confidential or proprietary or PII in advance of it coming, out into the vendor side. I don't see as much proactive removal of data like that before it comes downstream. I think part of the reason for that is people are still dipping their toe in those technologies, and they want to make sure they don't omit something that could be relevant. And they also may want to still see those documents and capture that information, even if they ultimately don't produce it. But certainly when we look at the front end of the EDRM, the technology that our businesses are using today just for their day-to-day operations are starting to move more towards having greater capabilities around identifying that personal or confidential information up front.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, I think one of the benefits of modern technology and the flexibility of these self-service platforms is, there is absolutely the ability to collect a data source that has that sensitive information in it, process it, load it into your review platform, and before giving access to anyone outside of the firm or anyone outside of the corporation, to be able to go in and leverage technology like automated redactions for project names or social security numbers or credit card numbers or patient numbers or whatever that information might be, have that data collected in its raw form, processed in its raw form, loaded in its raw form, restricted from access from all those parties that you would not like to have access to it until you've run those automated processes to flag and remove that content, either through redactions or simply by limiting access to those types of records. And then once that process has been done, moving the records either post-redaction or just simply the records that don't contain that content into the generally available population for further review. Just got another question in the window here. What tools are available in Spectra? I'm going to assume here, but please do type in if I'm wrong here, that when you say tools, are you wanting to understand the underlying technology that drives the platforms, or additional review efficiency applications? But I will guess that it's the former, but please type in a question if it's not. Allison, would you like to handle this one, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I'll take the part that has to do with what tools are available downstream, and I'll broaden it out outside of even Spectra. I think a lot of the technology, and Jennifer, you mentioned this earlier, a lot of our clients, when they're looking at self-service, really want there to be additional add-ons and technologies that they can leverage in conjunction with their standard review databases. Some are looking for translation services. They want machine translation built into their environment. Some are looking for auto redaction tools to be in a position to be more efficient in their, auto redactions of PII and PHI. We have others who are looking to create efficiencies around, privilege logging and privilege categorization. How do we set up our reviews to be in a position to prioritize documents that are likely to be more relevant through predictive coding, or likely to be privileged through, some privilege applications. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the biggest questions that we get today is, how are we going to handle chat sources? How are we going to handle Slack? How are we going to handle text messages? Is that something we can do on our own? Is that something where we need to use a forensics team from our provider to help us get down the line? And so the tools that I just mentioned are the kinds of add-ons that we have, with our Spectra self-service platform here at Lighthouse. I think they're also representative of the kinds of tools that, generally speaking, our clients are looking to apply when they're insourcing to address the kind of regular day-to-day problems that they're seeing. And Jennifer, if you have anything to add in terms of tools that you guys try and use on specific cases to try and move yourself along, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, we definitely are leveraging the automations for redaction and privilege logging, and those have been the privilege categorization has been a big, a helpful and adopter. Just being able to weed out, for instance, where the confidentiality is just in a footer versus in the body of a document. So those have been great. And additionally, we've had an uptick in usage of the BrainSpace, just general analytics, email threading, and being able to run, active learning sessions and things on our data. That's been very helpful to our case teams.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that with a lot of our, in-house teams like Debbie's, where they're going to want to dip their toe in trying to insource things like internal investigations. And instead of doing any kind of linear review, they want to use analytics, whether it be technologies like BrainSpace, relativity analytics, et cetera, to just try and be more efficient in trying to find, relevant or key documents. So that's definitely a good one to touch on as well.
I know we're very close to the top of the hour, so we will wait another quick second to see if there are any additional questions that we can answer. But if not, I really appreciate everyone attending today. Thank you for joining. You will get a survey link here shortly. If you wouldn't mind, please do fill it out, provide any feedback or commentary that you would like. You will also get a link to the deck today. I'd like to thank our panelists today. Debbie, really appreciate it. Jennifer, we're both wonderful. Allison, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And if there are no further questions, which I don't see any, then I will say thank you to everyone. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.